Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. Hello, everyone. Yeah, Tani, Leslie, Light and Dark Institute. I'm curious about, I can't wait to dive into the work that you do in the world and the space that you hold, the powerful space that you hold for our community, our Ignite Intimacy community. And really just, what feels top of mind for me today is this political conundrum that we're in here in America and what's happening with the upcoming inauguration this weekend and, just all of the light and the dark that is present here in our country and our world.
Yeah. What a big question to start on.
Yeah.
And first of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us on your show. We're really excited. Hi, everyone. We're excited to talk to this community and connect with you all.
Yes. Well, it's about time because, we've been talking about this for several months, and I actually met you guys through another guest that I had on the podcast this fall, Lindsay Miller, and just, had an amazing conversation with Lindsay. And then it was actually, it wasn't the weekend of her birthday party, but I met you guys at her birthday party, and it was so fun. And I didn't know who you were. So I didn't know who a lot of people were there. And then she did this little thing where a couple of her people came up and shared their magic in front of the party. And you guys were one of those people, and I was one of those people as well. Mm-hmm. And I was so intrigued by what you shared, this power play between, domination and submission and the light and the dark and, dancing with that energy and uncovering it, and owning it and looking at it and acknowledging it, and I'm just bubbling with excitement right now because I've wanted to have guests on the podcast on Ignite Intimacy to talk more about this because the dark and the light comes up so frequently, especially in romantic relationships, especially when it comes to sex and sexuality and intimacy, right? So I'm just so curious about, talk to us a little bit about just how you guys came together. Like, what was that like? What was that journey like for you two?
Thank you. Yeah, and we should definitely revisit the politics question.
We will.
We've got a lot to say on that. but sure, we'll let you all know a little bit about who we are first. We both, so I'm Tani and
Leslie.
And we both done a lot of exploration in our lives through a lot of different modalities, spirituality, personal growth, sexuality, and we both had interesting relationships in our own selves before we met in terms of how to balance the light and the dark. My version was I really had felt like a war between my light side and my dark side internally. Mm-hmm. My light side was this sort of spiritual, everything is good. I want to be a kind person. I want everyone to be kind in the world. And that very sort of light focused, but that part of me couldn't quite reconcile the other part of me that, was into kink, had gone through drug addiction, was a punk rocker and an anarchist, had gone through all these phases and where I had gotten so much juice from these darker energies, but they seemed so in contradiction to those light spiritual aspects of myself. And so for myself, I kind of had these polarizing swings between my light side and my dark side for a long time in my life. And at one point I even went through a period where I completely swore off my dark side, which, was a very interesting experiment. And there was a lot of richness in terms of growing my quote unquote light side that happened during that period. But eventually I came to realize that my dark side actually was beautiful and that rejecting it wasn't getting me anywhere and that there was actually so much growth and transformation to be had there. And right about that time, I met Leslie, and he had been on his own journey, which I think it would be fair to say was more about kind of constantly turning towards the light and being convinced that he didn't even have a dark side, very much the nice guy, the good guy. And he had more recently started exploring sexuality and particularly getting into darker energies through that and really opening into that side of himself. And when we came together, when we met at that time, I had just very recently decided that I wanted to re-include my dark side and re-include specifically BDSM, which was something that I'd always had an interest in, but had had a lot of judgment around and had feared that it was just, something was sick or wrong with me, or why did I like that? Where was it coming from? Was it unhealthy? And I finally had come to terms with the fact that it actually was a very healthy and vital part of me that was actually integral to me being my full self. And so I was finding a relationship where I could play with power dynamics and where I could have the opportunity to be submissive to a dominant partner. And Leslie sort of arose to that energetic call that I was putting out into the universe and suddenly stepped into his own dominant self. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that, because it was the night that we came together was a very, very powerful experience for both of us.
Yeah, it was. I mean, for me, I had no idea. I had some experiences with some power dynamics in kink, but I didn't like this idea of like having a relationship where one person's dominant and the other one's submissive was strange to me. But I was game. I mean, I was game. I was like, wow, I wonder what that's like. Like just totally wanting to explore and feeling really drawn to Tani. And so when it came out, like when that part of me just erupted outward in our first night together, by the end of it, I looked around and I was like, I'm a different person.
Wow.
Like actually I was more like, wow. What tiny little games I have been playing.
And where were you hiding? Where were you hiding all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it was hiding because I didn't think that the aggressive, like these parts of myself were acceptable. Like I just pressed them down and they had no access, no expression. And so when they found expression, it was like discovering a whole other part. Like it's like you wake up and you discover you're a different person, and a much like the kind of person that secret part of you always wished you were.
Totally. The one you've been denying all these years. Poor thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it was such a massive integration moment and a wake up and integration moment. It was the biggest one that I had ever experienced in that amount of time. I mean, by a long shot, and still is. And that's from there, and the relationship that then generated us. Like it just became so generative as we explored this further, and it became really powerful for our friends and community around us, who both watching our transformation and then them being drawn into play, because us playing out these kind of like extreme power dynamics revealed the hidden power dynamics that were going on everywhere. And it was like suddenly we were both woke up with like a new vision, like, cool. Like all these other skills that we'd both acquired, as me as a coach and Tani as an energy worker, got to be really magnified by like looking at the power dynamics and stepping into it with play and playing with people. And it was embodied, visceral transformation. And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to create for people. Because I started doing like Dom coaching because it was so much more effective than
talk therapy.
Kind of working with people. Yeah, like talk therapy. It was like let's go into your darkness, your anger, your shame, and like say like, and that's the stuff. Like that's the good stuff.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna work with. And it was just so powerful, but it still wasn't an embodied experience yet. And so that's when we started like Dark Institute and started doing experiences for people so they could have an embodied experience, so they could leave changed. And that's what we've done. We've basically took the experience of our first night and created that for our clients.
Oh my God, I love that. Well, and because I think about my own experience with the rage that was really, I probably came into this life with a lot of it. And then that just was born from what I experienced as a child and growing up. And I also am highly empathic, highly intuitive. So I'm also absorbing things that aren't mine as well. So, but I didn't realize that back then. And I know that when I was 16 and I left home and did all that, rebellion, traveling, and I was, got really fucked up, and I was out there, and then I got into a heap of trouble, which saved my life, really. And I ended up being in a couple of different rehabs, and really, I mean, I've been in different forms of therapy my entire life since I was 16. And I remember that I was in a 3/4 way house in Louisiana. I was living there for 10 months when I was 16 and 17. And my therapist there would try to get me to do like this anger work. And I just was so scared to let that part out. One, because I didn't want to look or sound foolish. It was like, there were like these different energies at play. And then the other, just because I wasn't sure if I could get back to myself, if I fully felt it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I could see how the type of work that you do creates a totally different space because it's, let's talk about it. Cause I know your business is in an evolution right now. So, and I'll share your bio and stuff like that at some point during the conversation, just so the Ignite Intimacy community really knows the powers that we have here on the line today. But, talk to us, share with us more about what these weekend intensives are and what type of push and pull and play and different things tools are you using to help draw this stuff out of people.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. It's certainly a subject we love talking about. We are so blessed to get to do the most amazing work with our clients. It's just amazing and life-changing and so magical every time. We just are we love it so much. The work that we actually started off doing and still is we still offer for clients that are ready to take the really deep dive. We do workshops and classes as well, but our really deep dive is called the Light Dark Experience, and it's a 3-day, 2-night intensive that is completely individualized. We work with just one individual or one couple at a time. So for that full 3 days and 2 nights, it's both of us completely with all of our attention on that one person or that couple. And it is an amazing, amazing time. It's like doing a few years of personal development work or therapy all kind of packed into one weekend. And it just has the most amazing transformational effects on people's lives. And in that it's impossible to generalize because each one is radically different from each other one. One of the really big things that we work with is having the client set intentions for what they want in their life before they come in. And we work really heavily with those intentions. Once they've landed those things of how they're wanting to be, who they're wanting to be in their life, then we basically surrender ourselves to those intentions and to whatever comes through us to guide the client into that fullest expression of themselves and to help them step through whatever blocks and barriers and old stories have been holding them back from getting there. And what we do along the way varies radically, but there's a lot of play and a lot of embodied play and discussing as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's play and like more sort of like talking through things and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the thing that makes it really magical is that once we go in, we create the highest priority is creating safety, because that's, we're basically creating a bubble for you to just go anywhere. And what we're going to go into are all basically what we're exploring and what we're looking into is all the hidden parts that you've been scared to go into, or all the places where it's, I can't face that, I can't face that, I can't face that. And we're not going and our approach is different than talk therapy or other approaches. It's less, even though on the one hand, we're literally doing it in a dungeon, so it sounds scarier and darker. But what people find over and over again is that it actually makes it easier because we're resetting the context into the external is dark. And so the internal thing that we're coming in on is not nearly like, it's not nearly as searing or painful necessarily. You know, we're coming in in a spirit of play, and we're inviting that one. We're not coming in to heal. We're coming in to invite that one to come out and play with us.
Okay.
And
So can we unpack the word play? Because we all have a different idea of what play is. So I can imagine maybe some of our listeners are like, play, like fairyland play, like going to the amusement park and playing, you know, and then some of our listeners might be like, oh, play. Okay, we're talking dungeons and like, okay, what kind of play are we talking about? So can you unpack that for us just so we're super clear?
Yeah, well, we are focusing on the dark for the experience because of its lack, you know, so oftentimes we go to the kind of the work of revealing and the light, you know, bringing consciousness and dissolution to those, to, you know, programs of the past or whatever we're doing in our healing work. We do it with play. We're doing it different. We're focusing on the dark, but that doesn't mean it stays in the dark. But we set this context in a dungeon so that we can, because the rich parts are the parts we've hidden away from ourselves, and a dungeon is literally a hidden away place, right? That we're in.
Yep.
And so it's like gives permission for those parts to come out. But in terms of what we mean by play, when we talk about it, we really mean all forms of play because it goes everywhere. You know,
we can go to fairyland, or we can go to the demon realms,
or we could be in the, you know, in just realms, like, or we can be just in the grief of a death of someone you love, but in a way that's not just you necessarily sitting there weeping. It can be, but it can be, you know, I've become a dead relative in the power dynamic, you know, in that play, what's possible. I've become someone else's just grief, just their raw grief. And I know what it is to be grief. Not even my own grief, just grief for someone with someone else.
Wow.
Because what we're playing in is like, we're talking about, you know, when a submissive fully steps in, they can become anything. They can become any way. And we're not always playing in full power dynamics where one person's taking power over the other, but that's a really good way to get things really moving.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the shadow work is in power dynamics. So we tend to we want to go oftentimes to the furthest extreme of power and surrender that, you know, we want to go that the client is able to step into, because then the further we all go, the more they can look back and go, wow. And just, I mean, it's just like a moment of play reveals like a year of talk therapy, a moment where you step into that thing that you would talk about for a year and think there was something wrong with you. And then you step into it and you're like, oh, there's part of myself that wants to hurt others that I've been like trying to get control over because I don't want to, you know, sabotaging my life and messing up my relationships. Suddenly I step into it in a consensual container, and it's actually a really awesome part of myself that actually, when I really let it run fully, it actually has more love and care to offer than the parts of myself that are trying to keep it under control. And that's always like, there's always these like really amazing reveals that are really hard to put into words because they're so paradoxical. Like, how could a sadist be, you know, Mother Teresa? But, you know, some people think Mother Teresa was a sadist. So,
wow. So
does that,
it does.
Does that translate?
Well, it does. And as far as play, I mean, I'm going to keep kind of, I think, coming back to this because I know for me, like, I haven't been in a dungeon yet, you know, so I've seen pictures, I've seen some live BDSM play that I've watched, but I'm going to assume that a lot of our listeners may not even know what that looks like or what that feels like. And then I would assume that a lot of people equate BDSM with sex. So let's unpack that, you know, let's go there for a minute.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Well, we should probably start off by clarifying what the BDSM acronym stands for, because a lot of people don't know that, including myself, until I really started deciding I really wanted to pursue that heavily in my life. BDSM which is also known as kink, also sometimes known as S&M. The full acronym BDSM is actually a little bit deceptive because it's actually a 6-letter acronym compressed into 4. It really, if you spread it out, it would be BDDSSM. The B and D stand for bondage and discipline, which, everybody knows what bondage is. Discipline is a particular way of, creating rules and structures and disciplining someone. And then DS and SM are the two that we kind of primarily play with and look at. DS stands for domination and submission, and SM stands for sadism and masochism, or sadomasochism. DS tends to be more in the psychological realms. Domination and submission has more to do with one person taking authority over another person. There doesn't necessarily even need to be any touch involved. You could be telling someone, this is what you're wearing today, and this is how you're going to, and you're going to walk in this particular way, and you're going to only address me this particular way. There's a lot of different ways to play with it. Mm-hmm. And SM, sadism and masochism, is about one person applying sensation to another person. It can be in the mind, like it could be terrifying someone as a form of sadomasochism, or it can be in the way that it's more often thought of is physical, like somebody doing something to another person's body. It doesn't necessarily mean pain. It has that association commonly, but it could be, if someone's running a feather along another person's skin, that is a form of SM. The sadist, in that case, the one applying sensation, is the one running the feather along the other person's skin, and the masochist, who's the receiver, is the one who's receiving that touch. There is an infinite array of possibility within the world of BDSM, and we have found it to be an amazing, amazing container for exploring shadow sides and exploring darkness, because one of the things, the BDSM community at large is a very mixed world. There are a lot of people in there for a lot of different reasons, anything from just having a good time to working on deep trauma and healing abuse from their past. And people in the community are at very different levels of consciousness. It's just a very, very mixed bag. But there are a lot of people in there that are using it in really amazing conscious ways. And we have found it to be an incredible tool because of the fact that there's so much, because BDSM goes into those darker and sometimes more dangerous territories, both psychologically and physically. There is a lot of safety built into the system. There are very clear containers around negotiating beforehand before you get into any kind of play, consent, safe words, aftercare. There are all these principles that we explain to our clients in more depth. But we use that container because it allows us to go really far, and it sets up an understanding that we're going to be going into places and pushing buttons and taking people out of their comfort zone, which gives us a tremendous amount of freedom and also gives our clients a tremendous amount of safety because they have safe words and they have the ability to say yes or no at any given time to anything that's happening. That all being said, BDSM is not the exclusive thing that we do. We use it as a tool because we found it to be so helpful. Our organization in general is pointed at really ultimately the notion that there actually is no such thing as light or dark in the world. There is no bad or good. Everything is beautiful. Everything is perfect. And we really look at the ways that we as humans tend to, through our conditioning, decide that certain things in ourselves and certain things in the world around us are okay and certain things are not okay. And those things that are not okay in the world around us, we push away or we don't want to look at, or we stick our head in the sand, or we live in fear. We fight it. I mean, we can certainly get into talking again about politics and the election. There's so much richness there. It's certainly a big area where we tend to reject what's going on in the world around us, or, seeing war or suffering. There's so many things that we reject about the world around us. And then in ourselves as well, no matter how much work we've done on ourselves and how much we've come to love ourselves and understand ourselves, inevitably there's still these parts that we have shame around that we push back. And it's like, I'm going to put that in 500 boxes and shove it in a dark closet and hope nobody can see it. And yet,
and hope I forget about it.
Exactly. Hope I forget about it and hope nobody else can see it. And yet it's still there and it's still part of us. And, part of it is a big charade because the truth is people can see those things about us, no matter how hard we're trying to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pretending they can't see it so that we don't feel bad. And we're pretending we don't know it's there so we don't have to look at it. But like, we can see those things about each other. So it's, on the one hand, it's like this big charade that's taking up all this energy. And on the other hand, another important thing about it is that those things that we've tucked away they're like incredible keys to parts of ourselves that we actually want out in our lives. Mm-hmm. Like, so often the things that we have tucked away because we have shame around are very connected to our personal power. Maybe it is that vicious, aggressive side, like you and Leslie were talking about a little earlier, or maybe it's that part of you that's really entitled and thinks that you deserve to have what you want. And, we push that away because it's like, oh God, it's not good to be entitled. It's not good to be aggressive. It's not good to be pushy. But the truth of the matter is then we're sitting here being like, why can't I create the life I want? And I feel so small. And why can't I, have the kind of relationships or the kind of work that I want? And it's actually through tapping those hidden parts of ourselves that we can start to find the part of us that can actually manifest what we want in our life and create the kind of life we want and step into our power in relationship to other people. So there's so much magic hidden away in those dark parts. And we've found that a big part of the access has to be going through the humiliation and the shame and the fear to get to those. And that's a part of why we use BDSM as the container, because it is so safe, and especially the way that we hold it is very focused on emotional and physical safety and creating a container in which people actually feel okay going to those places, because it's intense. It's intense to actually say, I'm going to look at that thing now that I've spent my entire life trying to not look at, and I'm going to have other people look at it and even point to it, and we're all going to look at it together, and oh my God, I actually didn't die. And actually, we're even more connected than we were before. And there's even more intimacy. And now I can be out with my full self and still be connected to the world around me and be okay and find approval even for those darkest places.
Wow. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Leslie, I feel like you've got something over there. So
the thing I want to talk about is yes and, which is actually what we really mean by play, even though we're starting in a dungeon. And another way to say yes and is it's called surrender. And that's actually like the biggest magic that we're teaching everyone, because the way what Tani just presented, it's so cool. It's like, this is kind of like the problem and solution. Like, our personal power is tucked away in our shame and our, we're hiding away from the world. And there's actually this huge part of ourselves that wants to come forward in the world. And it's so scary to look at those parts of ourselves and dive in. But what we're doing with the light dark experience is teaching people how to surrender and say yes when they're a full yes. And and then to really go there. And when you really go there, the thing you're so afraid of that's so terrible is actually like the best thing ever, right? It's like humiliation just seems like it's like a thing that most of us are running around just doing everything in our lives to avoid it. But when you can actually like have someone take you there, like go into it, like that spot that you're so ashamed of and it's terrible, no one should ever see it, and they just go in on that spot, like just I see you in full, like, oh, I see that part in you, and you're like, but you're like allowing, you're saying yes, you're allowing it to be seen. It's one of the biggest healing events that our clients can go through is a humiliation. It's always incredibly potent. And again, it's another one of those moments where it's like a year's worth of talk therapy, just trying to get to finally saying the thing and admitting to yourself that this part is lovable and valuable, but when we go on it in the dark and you learn how to surrender, like consensually, because that's the only way you can ever surrender, because that's the magic, is that you can't ever surrender unless you really surrender. It's like actually the only place we're really at choice is where we surrender. And that's what we teach, and that's what we do, greater sense of discovery. And so when our clients leave it in the light, we talk about consciousness, but in the dark, we talk about consensuality, because if you do something in the dark that's not consensual, it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't actually take you to where you want to go, ever. It never does, because it always has a bite back, like if you press somebody, they bite back at you. Like, it's just how it goes. This is history. But if you do it consensually, it has the opposite effect, where You know what I mean? If you're biting someone who wants to be bit, you're both having a really great time, and both of you are getting satisfied in these deep, needed, seated places inside of yourself. It's pretty amazing when we, you know, as we go through the world and really start to look through these new eyes that we have, we really just see everybody playing out this big kinky game that we call civilization. You know. Like, we're all in power dynamics. We got teachers and students. We got government, civilians. We got military. I mean, to talk about a kinky organization.
Oh, seriously.
Whoa. Yes, sir.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, totally. And I mean, they use all of this stuff, you know, they're using this, they use all of it. They use, you know, the dungeon and the torture and the, you know, domination and submission and it's really interesting. But let's talk about humiliation. And so you guys use humiliation, and you go into a lot of the shame and the fear stuff that most human beings are carrying around with them for Goddess only knows why. But, you know, all of us have had our experiences in our lives, whether they were handed to us and it's a generational DNA like thing, or things that we've actually experienced or picked up while we've been living in these lives. And so let's talk about the use of humiliation to deal with shame and fear. Because I'm going to assume that there are people listening who are just like, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. And that's fine. And that's fine. And also, like, you know, when you can really go there, there's something so incredibly powerful about that. And, you know, just being able to open up to that scary energy. I mean, who wants to be humiliated? But, well, there are people who want to, I mean, it's a thing. And then what about the power of humiliation in order to really get to the core, to the heart of the matter for true foundational healing and growth?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a really interesting thing because, I mean, the main thing I would say about it is if you have something you're ashamed of and you finally out it, you're like, you know what, I feel like when I'm in a big group of people, I feel useless. Like, I feel like nobody wants to talk to me. I feel this deep-seated, like, unworthiness when I'm in a big group of people. And I just, and then eventually I just want to get out of there and I have a panic attack, right? Well, you know, when you look in on that one that's scared of people, you know, it really depends on what's there. But if it's something like unworthiness, you know, really what's going on from our perspective is there's one in you who just really wants to be seen in your unworthiness. You just absolute uselessness. But when you try to approach from the mental state, it always eludes you because you can think about it forever, you know, but you really just see as this like part of yourself that you can't get rid of and you wish you could, right? But when you go with humiliation, what you're doing is bypassing the cortex, the like part of yourself that thinks about it and thinks about what it means to who you are. Yeah. And when you go into humiliation, you're bringing it into the body. It's really just like this magical way of just like totally experiencing the body and bypassing the brain. Because the brain, as long as you're like consensually allowing someone to humiliate you, like you're a full yes, which is hard to imagine, but we help people get, you know, it's a facilitated process. We help people to get there. But as long as you can say yes to it, it's immediate how fast you just drop into your body and all your thoughts careen around it in this big spiral. Like, oh my God, you're seeing me. Like, this is happening. Like, no, I can't believe that I actually really want to be worthy. Like, I actually feel so good in my belly and my genitals and my heart and every part of me is just exploding with warmth. And all I can think in this moment is, give me more. Give me more, even meaner, even gnarlier. Just keep going in. Like, once you get in there, that's how it feels. And it's a really incredible, yummy feeling. When you get done, you're like, wow, what an incredible part of myself that I've been trying to get rid of. But it's actually this incredible part that actually has a lot to offer, even in a large group. You know, be unworthy in a large group. Be the scared, shy, oh my God, I'm scared to talk to you, but just really do it. You know, like allow yourself just to really be in who you are. And that's actually really enjoyable. People love shy people and insecure. If you can embody, if you don't have disapproval for it, you can just embody that, like, hi, I really want to talk to you, but I'm scared. And the other person's like, oh my God, I love that you just said that because I can feel that. But now you're actually being out about it. You know, that's the actual level of play that we're all leading to. And it really comes about being willing to be humiliated and be embarrassed because that's actually you. That's actually you, because we're all so unique and different. We're all trying to live into these boxes that we were born into in this conditioned society that none of us, I assume in your community, finds to be oftentimes a very healthy thing to live into. Right? And so it's your very humiliation, your very embarrassment that holds the keys to your freedom from this conditioning. Because if it embarrasses you, that's magic. That's where the freedom to your cage is.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I just think of, you know, that own energy within myself. And I think of what that brings up for me. And oh my God, it's just like a pot full of juicy stuff that is like, wow, if I can manage to dive into that, oh gosh, like I'm just like, wow, like that is so powerful. And it is the things that we avoid the most when we can actually start facing that and coming to terms with that, and also having people around us who lovingly support us in coming to terms with those parts of ourselves, you know, and dancing and playing with those parts of ourselves and redefining our relationship to those parts of ourselves. I mean, that's the key is, you know, I had an experience with someone recently where they just were, you know, I had some stuff come up and I did my best to express it and it didn't work for them. And they reacted in a way that was mean and kind of cutting. And it was like, oh, this doesn't work for me. You know, like I need people who I can be the fullest expression of who I am with. And there's love there and curiosity and space. And, you know, it's like I would caution anyone who's in a relationship where you say one thing and the other person starts being mean, unless that's an agreed upon dynamic between two consenting mature adults, then I'm like, that's a red flag for me anyways, you know?
Yeah. This is awesome. I'm like, there's so many things I want to say. And I think there are two big ones that are kind of in different directions that came up from both what Leslie just said and what you just said. So I'm gonna try to jump into both of them. One is related to the humiliation piece. You know, the funny thing is, like, the things that I mentioned this earlier, but the things that we're spending so much attention and energy trying to hide are things that everybody can see anyway. And as far as people, you know, like you were mentioning, that people listening to this may think, oh God, why would I go there? And I totally understand. And even for me, before we got together and started doing our work, I thought that humiliation play, which is an arena in BDSM, I thought that was something I was not into, because I was like, no, that's just going to fuck me up psychologically. I don't want to go there. No. And it is true that it's very, very, very important that it be held in a really strong container, because it is playing with very, very hot fire. And if it's not done like with a lot of intention and a lot of skilled holding, it can get into some problematic territory. So, but it's also true that those are the things that are really blocking our intimacy. You know, in this program being about intimacy and connection, so much of that where we're trying to hide these parts of ourselves, that is a tremendous block to our intimacy with the people that we love and care about, or even people that we know in our day-to-day life with not only with partners and lovers, but with coworkers and our children and our family. I mean, family is a big one where we hide, right? And so the more that we can actually go into touching those places where we have shame, the more we can be our full selves with the people in our lives. And there's a tremendous amount of intimacy that opens up. You know, if you think about the difference, if everyone listening to this can imagine what it's like, you know, imagine a relationship that you have in your life where you are not fully out, where there's parts of yourself that you're trying to hide and cover up and make seem nicer than they are, or make yourself seem more powerful than you are, or make yourself seem more confident or more polite, or like you've got it more together than what actually you feel is true inside of you, and how much energy that spends and how much distance that puts between you and that person. And then imagine for a second, and it's scary to even imagine the possibility, but imagine what it would be like if you could be fully out in that relationship. And if you didn't have any judgment of yourself, and you knew that even if they judge you, you're still okay, and you have full approval for yourself, and you love yourself, and you're going to take good care of yourself, and you know that you're awesome, how differently you would show up in that relationship, and the amount of intimacy that would be created there. Even if they're like, whoa, I actually want nothing to do with you, but there's an intimacy in you having been out with your full self. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole different creature. And to actually get to live your life from that place with every relationship everywhere is a really, really incredible gift. And so that's, going into the shame and going into the darkness is the gateway to get there. But it's like the promised land on the other side when you actually get to be your full self in every relationship that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, so
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that was
Love
one
that.
thing. And then there's another thing. But yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to say is we work a lot with the concepts of yes and no. And this is partly in response to what you were just saying about, well, I can't actually remember exactly what you said at the moment, but there was
being mean.
Right, when someone's being mean to you, right? And it's like, how do you take care of yourself in that place where you're like, actually, I want to surround myself with people that see me. And that is totally an awesome way to build your life. But one of the things that we really work with our clients on and that we teach in our classes is getting your life to a place where you're really living from honest yes and honest no in every moment, and really growing your muscles in both of those directions. So the honest yes would be like, okay, if I am actually a yes, what if I'm hanging out with somebody that doesn't see me and is making cutting remarks? Like there are two directions I can choose. My no would be set a boundary and take care of myself and say, you know what, I actually maybe don't need this friendship. Or maybe I'm actually going to say, hey, it hurts when you say that to me, or take care of myself in some other way. And then the yes would be, is there a way I can lean into this? Is there a way that I can actually even get off on this? Like, whoa, there's actually a little bit of a humiliation scene happening right here that's not a consensual container, but is there a way that I can actually take this and let in the cutting comment that they're saying and say, whoa, maybe where is the place where that's true for me? And just let myself be a little bit destroyed by it, but love myself and hold myself in that place and actually get off on it and breathe through it and find even more compassion for myself and even more ability to be out as a result. So people can take it to either the yes or the no, but the thing we always say is the gray zone is hell. And we as humans spend an awful lot of time in the gray zone where we're either doing things out of obligation because we feel like we should, or people are crossing our boundaries, but we don't know how to say no, or, we're doing this thing, but we really feel like we should be enjoying it, but we're really not. And so what we really work with people on is like, if you're in that gray zone where it feels icky, how do you get to either yes or no? Either one is good. Maybe it's a no. Maybe you need to set a boundary and take care of yourself and end whatever's happening. Or maybe it's a yes. Can you deepen into your surrender? Can you deepen into your yes to what's happening? Mm-hmm. But like hanging out in the gray zone is no fun for anybody.
I agree. God. That's like one of the most uncomfortable feelings. And you don't always know the yes or no right away. Sometimes you need to be in the gray zone for a minute to figure it out, but it is important. And I love how you put that. It's like, yeah, you can choose. Like, I'm going to set a boundary here and that doesn't work for me, or gosh, what if I lean into that? And what if I allow myself to just feel exposed? And, what is possible then? So, God, we could just go on and on and on. And what I'd love to do is I want to share just a little bit more about you two with the Ignite Intimacy audience. And then I just want to touch briefly on the political piece that we started the conversation with before we complete this conversation for today. But so just so everyone knows, the folks that we have on the line today, Leslie and Tani are a couple. They work together. They've built an incredible business together. It's called the Light and Dark Institute, which is dedicated to expanding and enriching the range of human experience through drawing out people's ability to say yes to their darker, unknown aspects and find all the intimacy, fulfillment, and deep personal power that is hidden there. So Tani Thole and Leslie Rogers have dedicated their lives to study and exploration into the human psyche and its relationship with the non-material world through spirituality, psychology, personal development, sexuality, and BDSM. They founded the Light and Dark Institute out of a passion for sharing the ways that exploring our dark sides can radically awaken and liberate us from the old patterns that have held us back and kept us in judgment of ourselves and the world around us. Ho ho! Yes. Thank you very much. So glad you're out here in the world doing this powerful, powerful work. Before we wrap today, just any brief thoughts on what's happening in our world politically here? And I mean, there's so much going on globally, but there's more than enough happening in America right now. Just any thoughts on just the dark and light and the push and pull and the humiliation and, you know, everything that's sort of being in play right now?
We've elected a kinky president, you know, and it's not like politicians aren't kinky, right? We all know this, right? Like it's the whole thing is quite a show, right? But what's interesting about for our perspective, what's interesting about Donald Trump and what's going on, when you look at it from just the energetics of it, we're really like Donald Trump is bringing in, there's a shift happening, right? Like we haven't had a candidate like that before, you know, like just on multiple levels. Like there's some things you could relate to, but like someone who's so just, you know, like you could hear about him hiring prostitutes and having them pee in front of you in a hotel and you totally believe it. You're like, yeah, of course, that's him. We all know. Mm-hmm. We all know it's happening. Right. So there's this incredible magic of a magical shift of acceptance of some things that weren't there before, you know, like presidents had to be married and Christian before, you know, like there's always, so there's this big opening happening. Right. And then of course there's like all the fears around what a narcissistic personality can create in the president. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, the thing that we take away from Donald Trump is what can we learn? Because narcissists are powerful, right? And narcissist psychopath pathology, there's a lot of power that they hold, and we hold mental illness as just, we're all mentally ill to some degree because none of us fit into the box that's there, right? But we can see that Donald Trump has some extreme expressions of narcissism and some sociopathy, right? Like there's something going on there, right? But the cool thing is that makes him an amazing shadow player. It makes him an amazing shadow player because on the one hand, he's very thin-skinned, but on the other hand, where he's done really well, and I think the source of his power in our culture, the way it is his willingness to say yes, like saying the dark thing, saying the thing that's on people's minds, and nobody's willing to actually say it. Everybody jumps in with criticism, and all that turns into, for him, is media coverage, right? He's a multi-billionaire who hasn't hardly had to pay a thing for the president. You know what I mean? Like he's used our circus to draw all this coverage to him. So there's some powerful things in there. Like, wow, we're living in a time when you speak the truth of what's on people's minds. I'm not saying he's saying the truth, but the truth of what's on people's minds. We can actually like tap into this upswell. And so what I see going on is he can be an inspiration for us. You know, like if you don't agree with him politically or whatever, there's a lot of things to say on that front. I'm not going to go on the dualistic front of it, but if you don't agree with him politically, we can at least look at him and be like, okay, he has shown that this is one way you can obtain power in this country, right? But not necessarily following his route, but at least following his spirit of like saying yes to darkness, saying like willingness to be like, you know what? There's this part of me, like I want to like really embrace these parts of myself that actually want to stop pretending like I'm powerless. Like I'm going to use Donald Trump as my compatriot, as my comrade in a rising in my own personal power. Well, you know, yeah, I mean, and I think he deals with humiliation quite well, honestly. Like, I think that, you know, as much as I pray for him and trust in the ignition of love and peace and oneness and the hearts and minds and souls of all beings everywhere in all directions of space and time. And that is the power. That is what I stand for in this life. And also I know that we can learn a lot from
watching him and the way that he is a master manipulator. And he knows how to, ignite something and then wield that power. And it's very scary and it's very intriguing and very interesting. So there's a lot that we can learn by just watching him. And there's a lot we can learn about ourselves. There's a lot that we can learn about how to utilize the power of, speaking to the dark side, speaking to the thing that nobody's speaking to, saying the outrageous things that nobody else is saying, and that there are people, lots of people, clearly, who are saying, yeah, thank you for saying that, and now we're going to keep saying it. And there's been a lot of really, really atrocious things that have occurred over the last several months that are really disgusting and horrible, but in my humble opinion, but, that's part of the dark side, and I would rather have us seeing it more fully than not seeing it. So instead of it remaining hidden in these little pockets everywhere, it's coming to the surface, which I actually think is a positive thing because we need to see it so that we can deal with it and play with it and navigate it and redefine our relationship to it and alchemize it, right? So, okay. So where can people find you online?
Our website is lightdarkinstitute.com. That's all one word. lightdarkinstitute.com. Yeah. And we have information on there about the Light Dark experience, which is that 3-day, 2-night intensive, our very deep dive for people that are ready to they're like on the precipice, ready to massively transform their lives and need help taking that leap. And we also have information about workshops and upcoming events on our website.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So Light and Dark Institute.
No, there's no and.
Sorry.
There's no and.
Okay.
Just Light Dark Institute.
Lightdarkinstitute.com. And then do you have an email address?
Yeah, you can reach us at info@lightdarkinstitute.com.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you both so much for joining us here today on Ignite Intimacy. This has been a powerful conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's Laura, it's so good to be here speaking to your listeners. I'm so grateful that you have this show and you're giving voice to these issues.
Thank everyone for listening today.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Tani and Leslie, lightdarkinstitute.com. Ignite Intimacy. It's been another powerful conversation. And, I'm just curious, how are we all going to venture into the dark a little bit more and start to dive into those parts of ourselves that we either feel embarrassed or humiliated by, or that we're just like not willing to face yet? I'm just going to sit with that within myself. I know that, as I live life on the edge of my comfort zone pretty frequently, I'm already doing that pretty much on a regular basis. I have a way of just like putting myself out there. So it's all good. It's all part of this grand and glorious magical adventure we're here experiencing on the physical earthly plane. And I just send you all the biggest love and the biggest light. Stay blessed and stick around for the next one. All right. Ignite Intimacy, and holler at us. hello@igniteintimacy.com. If you have any thoughts, questions, anything you'd like to relay to Tani and Leslie, or for future topics that you'd like to see covered on Ignite Intimacy. All right. Ciao for now, and we'll see you on the next one. Bless. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.